I don't have a hobby of eating with old women, you know. Oh, but it's so unfair if I'm the only one who doesn't get a treat. So, buy me a sandwich on your way back. Make sure it's a healthy one. One day, the company cafeteria was closed for repairs, so we had no choice but to go out for lunch. I decided to treat everyone as a gesture of appreciation for their hard work. The office erupted in cheers. As we were about to head outside, I noticed that Elizabeth, the only one, hadn't budged from her seat. "Elizabeth, aren't you coming? I don't want to eat lunch with an old woman like you." Her rude response took me by surprise. It was hard to believe she was talking to her boss with such disrespect. "Hey, that's enough." Stephen, one of my subordinates, stepped in and angrily confronted her. "So what? My dad's a director at this company, you know. If you can't listen to what I say, I'll have you and everyone else fired." She glared at Stephen and stormed out of the office, shouting hysterically, "Her dad is a director." The office burst into laughter. No one took her words seriously because, of course, there was no such director in our company. "My name is Helen. Since I was young, I've always excelled in academics, particularly in languages. After graduating from high school, I decided to study at a university in Japan. Upon graduation, I was hired by a major American corporation and quickly made a name for myself. Being a woman, climbing the corporate ladder was no easy feat, but the company was committed to improving women's status, and I received fair evaluations for my work. By the time I was in my 50s, I was transferred to the Tokyo branch as part of the company's international expansion. I was the first woman to hold the position of branch manager. However, in Japan, American methods didn't always work, and I often found myself clashing with subordinates and clients. But each time, I managed to overcome the challenges and earn the trust of those around me in this foreign land. Several years later, when I was past 60, I received an unexpected call from headquarters in the U.S. It was a direct request from the CEO to return home. "We've heard great things about your achievements in Japan, Helen. We'd like to have you bring that same success to our headquarters. But sir, I'm already in my 60s, a grandmother." "Really? Nonsense. We'd like you to lead our efforts in talent development." According to the CEO, the retention rate of new hires had been declining in recent years. There were plenty of talented individuals, but no one at headquarters who could effectively nurture them. Just when I was considering retirement due to my declining stamina, I found myself unable to refuse the CEO's earnest request. I bid farewell to the familiar office in Japan and returned to the U.S., a place I hadn't been for 7 years. "Helen, you look well. I'm so relieved. Welcome back." Waiting for me were my former subordinates. Tears filled their eyes as they warmly welcomed me back. Clearly moved by my return, I couldn't help but smile at the heartfelt reception. Though I had some lingering attachment to my work in Japan, those feelings quickly disappeared upon seeing the familiar faces of my colleagues back in the U.S. The young recruits from when I was last here had grown into reliable, confident leaders during the 7 years I'd been away. Looking at them now filled me with pride. "I'm back, everyone. I didn't think I'd ever work here again, but it looks like we'll be working together once more." I smiled as I glanced around at everyone, but among the familiar faces, one person particularly stood out. Of course, I didn't recognize the employees who had joined after I left for Japan, but this young woman's sulky expression caught my eye. In the midst of the cheerful welcome, she was the only one who wasn't smiling. She looked quite young, perhaps a new hire. Although she piqued my curiosity, I decided to focus on the joy of reuniting with my old colleagues for now. However, it wouldn't be long before I would clash with her Elizabeth. About a week after my return, one evening, I went to a hotel with some of my subordinates. They had organized a welcome party in my honor. I was led to a seat at the back of the room, where the event took place in a lively yet relaxed atmosphere. So how was life in Japan? We've been talking about how much we missed you while you were gone, Helen. I shared the details of my life in Japan. 7 years of living there had given me more stories than I could possibly tell. Everyone listened attentively, their expressions full of interest and admiration. But there was one person who didn't seem engaged at all, yawning with boredom. It was the same young woman from earlier who hadn't smiled during my return. I learned her name was Elizabeth. She had just joined the company this year, and today's party was also meant to welcome her. However, a subordinate sitting next to me quietly explained that Elizabeth seemed quite displeased, feeling as though I had stolen the spotlight from her with my sudden return. As the alcohol started to flow, Elizabeth, despite being a new hire, began behaving in a shockingly inappropriate manner. You know, I'm the type of girl who gets hit on by guys all the time. Right now, I'm dating like 5 guys at once. With a loud, piercing voice, Elizabeth bragged to the male employees about her romantic exploits. She continued talking as if showing off, but it was clear that everyone around her was becoming increasingly exasperated by her attitude. The female employees, in particular, were visibly outraged, thinking how shameless she was to boast about such things. As another employee tried to change the subject, Elizabeth, annoyed at losing control of the conversation, didn't bother to listen, and instead began fiddling with her smartphone, showing no interest in what anyone else had to say. At this rate, she would end up isolated in the workplace. Worried about this, I approached her and introduced myself. Nice to meet you, Elizabeth. We met briefly the other day, but this is the first time we've actually spoken. I understand it might be unsettling to have an older supervisor, but I'm looking forward to working with you. I hoped that by showing her some attention, as her superior, it would help ease the tense atmosphere among the other employees. But as I approached, her face twisted into an openly irritated expression. She sighed dramatically, as if I were a nuisance, and abruptly stood up. What's the matter? Why are you suddenly standing up? I have a date with my boyfriend now. I'm leaving, but this is also your welcome party. Can't you stay a little longer? Please don't push your outdated social customs on me. Mind if I post about this on social media? It might blow up, you know. With a mocking laugh, she ignored the employees trying to stop her and walked out of the restaurant. What's with her attitude? I've always thought she was strange, but I had no idea she was this disrespectful. Helen, I'm so sorry. I responded briefly. It's all right, but I couldn't deny that her behavior as a new employee would certainly lead to conflict with others. She's quite the troublemaker. This is going to be difficult. I sighed in exasperation. Afterward, I asked my colleagues about her work performance, and as expected, there were numerous issues. Since she was new, she was assigned relatively simple tasks, but she made frequent mistakes with documents, which required double-checking. Moreover, her phone manner was rude, leading to a flood of complaints whenever she answered the phone, leaving everyone frustrated. Of course, it's natural for a new employee to make mistakes, so I encouraged everyone to be patient and give her time. However, seeing her work firsthand was quite shocking. Elizabeth, could you make copies of these documents for the meeting? I'm busy with other tasks right now, so I can't do that. Ask someone else. Once again, She coldly refused a request I made. Her attitude was so disrespectful that the expressions of those around her grew increasingly severe. I couldn't let this go on, as it was starting to affect the morale of the entire department. "Elizabeth, could you come with me for a moment? I'd like to have a word with you." I called her into the meeting room. "What is it?" "I'm busy, so make it quick," Elizabeth said, her face twisted in irritation. "I've been noticing for a while now that your work attitude is unacceptable. Many people in the department have voiced complaints about you. I need you to be more respectful, especially towards the senior employees, and avoid disrupting the team dynamic." Her condescending behavior wasn't limited to me. She often treated others the same way, and as a result, her reputation within the department was terrible. There were even discussions about requesting her transferred to another team. If I left her unchecked, she would end up completely alienated, unable to continue working here. Before that happened, I felt it was necessary to get her to change her attitude. "What? I'm doing my best. Why should I be scolded?" Rather than apologizing, Elizabeth became defensive, insisting she wasn't at fault. "Calm down for a moment. It's precisely that kind of attitude that's making things difficult for everyone around you. I'm not doing anything wrong." "Oh, I get it. You're just jealous because I'm young and cute, right? I won't give in to this kind of intimidation, so excuse me." Without listening to a word I said, she stormed out of the meeting room. She's even more troublesome than I thought. With an attitude like that, the road ahead was bound to be difficult. I had hoped that addressing her behavior would lead to some improvement, but that seemed unlikely now. I let out a deep sigh. The next day, to my dismay, she failed to show up for work without notifying anyone. In our company, it's mandatory to inform your supervisor if you're going to be absent, especially on the same day. She certainly knew this rule, but no matter how long I waited, there was no call from her. Had she stayed home sulking after being reprimanded yesterday? Or perhaps something had happened to her, like an accident, that left her unable to call. Concerned, I decided to call her smartphone myself. After a few rings, someone answered with a hello, but it wasn't Elizabeth's voice. "Hello, is this Elizabeth's phone? She's resting in her room right now. I'm Mary, Elizabeth's mother. I'm calling because Elizabeth didn't notify us about her absence. Is she unwell?" Since Mary had answered instead of Elizabeth, I assumed she might be sick, but that turned out not to be the case. "How dare you act so innocent? She is deeply hurt because of you, and she's been miserable ever since." "What? Because of me?" Startled by the unexpected accusation, I asked her to clarify. Mary's voice, tinged with anger, continued. "You scolded Elizabeth terribly yesterday, didn't you? She came home in tears, saying she doesn't want to go back to work, and she's been locked in her room since. What were you thinking?" I'm sorry, but I was only trying to offer professional guidance as part of her job." "Stop with the excuses. My daughter is clearly devastated, and it's your fault." "I apologize. I'll be more mindful in the future." In reality, there was no need for me to apologize to Mary. As her superior, I had merely pointed out her inappropriate behavior in the workplace. But with her so heated, it was clear that reasoning with her would get me nowhere. Years of experience told me it was best to apologize for now and de-escalate the situation. Unbelievable. "If my husband finds out about this, your career will be over. Keep that in mind." With that, the phone call ended abruptly. It was unclear when Elizabeth would return to work. However, something she had said kept nagging at me. I had served as the head of our Tokyo branch, with a solid career behind me. Why would my life be over? Was there something about Elizabeth that I didn't know? I decided to ask the other employees if they knew anything more about her. But everyone just shrugged and replied, I have no idea. What on earth was Mary talking about? Could Elizabeth's father be a politician or a bureaucrat? I've dealt with such people before. It's not uncommon for people in power to exert pressure, just like Mary had done earlier. But would her father really get involved over something so trivial, simply because Mary was defending her daughter? I couldn't help but feel uneasy about Elizabeth's strange family, but for now, there was nothing I could do. So I decided to put it out of my mind. 3 days passed. Still, no word from Elizabeth. She continued to miss work without permission. What on earth was she doing? I called her smartphone again, and once more, Mary answered instead of Elizabeth. Oh, it's you again. What do you want this time? Mary's tone was confrontational from the start. I pressed on, asking how she was doing. According to Mary, she had been staying up late and sleeping all day. Thanks to you, she is emotionally scarred and can't sleep at night. You need to take responsibility. But how am I supposed to take responsibility for that? If you want my daughter to go back to work, you need to give her a wake-up call in the morning. Wake her up yourself. Mary's demand was utterly absurd. It was so ridiculous that instead of feeling angry, I couldn't help but laugh. I'm sorry, but I have no intention of treating a grown woman like a child by calling her to wake her up. Please inform her that if her absences continue, it will affect her performance evaluation. Goodbye. From the previous call, I knew that the longer the conversation dragged on, the more Mary would spiral into anger, making any discussion impossible. So, after stating my message, I ended the call myself. Now, let's see what happens. The next day, Elizabeth showed up at work with a sulky expression on her face. However, she didn't offer a word of apology for her days of unapproved absences, and she sat at her desk with a sullen look. The other employees kept their distance, whispering amongst themselves as they watched her. For the next few days, Elizabeth continued to come to work without any apparent issues, and on the surface, things seemed peaceful. But then, a significant incident occurred. One day, the company cafeteria was closed for kitchen repairs, so we had no choice but to go out for lunch. Well, it can't be helped. As a special treat, lunch is on me. Let's all go grab something to eat together, I said. The office erupted in cheers as everyone prepared to head out. But as we were about to leave, I noticed that Elizabeth was still at her desk and hadn't gotten up to join us. Elizabeth, aren't you coming? I asked. I don't have any interest in eating with old ladies. But since it's unfair if I don't get treated like everyone else, why don't you buy me a sandwich instead? Her response was shockingly rude, especially toward her superior. Hey, cut it out already. Stephen, one of my subordinates, who had been listening to the conversation, confronted Elizabeth, but she glared back at him and retorted without backing down. What? My dad's a board member at this company. I'll get the old lady and everyone else here fired. With that hysterical outburst, Elizabeth stormed out of the office. Her dad's a company director. Immediately, laughter erupted throughout the office. Elizabeth's claim was so absurd that no one took her seriously. The story quickly spread to other departments, and soon, Elizabeth became a laughingstock, known for being a compulsive liar. It was no surprise that no one believed her. Her last name was Whitaker, an unusual name, but everyone knew there wasn't anyone by that name on the company's board of directors. What bothered me, though, was that Elizabeth didn't seem like she was lying. She seemed serious. Just to be sure, I decided to report the incident to Thomas, the company CEO. Thomas, the current CEO, had once been my subordinate, and even now, he still held a great deal of respect for me. I relayed Elizabeth's claim to him and asked if there was anyone on the board named Whitaker. But Thomas shook his head. "No, we don't have any board members named Whitaker." "She must be mistaken." "I see. But do you remember if there was someone by that name in the past? Maybe Elizabeth's father wasn't a current director, but someone who had been with the company before." Thomas furrowed his brow, considering my words. "At least since I joined the company, there's never been a director by that name." "Wait a second." Suddenly, something seemed to click for Thomas. "Is there something you recall?" What Thomas said next shocked me. He did indeed remember someone named Whitaker, but that person wasn't a board member. He had been a janitor. Elizabeth's father, Nicholas Whitaker, had worked as a janitor at our company about 10 years ago. There was no story about him being promoted to the board. And Thomas told me that Whitaker had left the company several years ago. I remember now. The head of HR back then went to high school with Whitaker. Apparently, Whitaker had been laid off from his previous job, and when he begged for work, the HR head brought him on as a janitor. It seemed that Whitaker's connection to the HR director also played a role in Elizabeth getting hired at the company. After struggling to find a job after graduating from college, Elizabeth had been given a position here as a favor to her father, who had once again begged the HR director to help. The HR director had since retired, so the only person who could explain this situation was Nicholas Whitaker himself. I decided to call both Elizabeth and her father to the company for a meeting to get to the bottom of the story. "I deeply apologize. My daughter has caused so much trouble." As soon as Nicholas Whitaker, Elizabeth's father, entered the room, he began apologizing profusely. Elizabeth looked confused by his behavior. "Dad, what are you doing? You were a former executive at this company, weren't you?" That's a lie." Nicholas, his face pale, began to confess the lies he had been telling for years. He admitted that he had kept his job as a janitor a secret from his family, and had lied, claiming he was an executive. 10 years ago, when he was hired as a janitor, he had told his wife and daughter, "I've been recruited by a major corporation." As time went on, when his work earned him access to the executive suite for cleaning duties, "I've been promoted to the board. I'm now a director." He added to the lie. Nicholas had always gone to work in a suit, changing into his janitor's uniform in the locker room. Then, after finishing his job, he would change back into his suit before returning home, so his family never suspected the truth. This can't be real. So Dad wasn't an executive, but a lowly janitor. Realizing she had been deceived by her father for years, Elizabeth screamed, "This is a lie! A lie!" She clutched her head and started to scream in frustration. "What do you mean, lowly? Sure, lying was wrong, but the fact that he contributed to this company for years is the truth. Who cares? Having a janitor for a dad is nothing to be proud of. How embarrassing." "Stop it. You shouldn't speak ill of your father." "Shut up, old hag. You're a liar too. You're the worst." Elizabeth began hurling insults at her father, ignoring me and Thomas as we tried to calm her down. "Enough. Do you have any idea how much your father did for you? How many people he begged to help you?" Thomas shouted at her, who had been screaming at her father in tears. After graduating from university, Elizabeth had spent years struggling as a failed YouTuber. Worried about her future, Nicholas had begged the then HR director to get Elizabeth hired at the company. "Mind your own business. I don't need a dad like him anymore." Ignoring everything, Elizabeth declared she was cutting ties with her father and stormed out of the room. This is all because of the lies I told. I truly apologize for everything. Left behind, Nicholas bowed deeply to Thomas and me, clearly filled with regret. The next day, as expected, Elizabeth didn't show up for work again, without any notice. Considering what had happened the day before, it wasn't surprising, but I couldn't let her disruptive behavior continue any longer. If her unexcused absences persisted, I planned to talk to her about the possibility of termination. However, no matter how many times I called her, she never answered. It seemed that as soon as Mary found out that she had been deceived by her husband, she returned to her parents' home. Tragically, Nicholas's lies had torn the family apart. After that, there was no direct contact. Elizabeth simply sent in a letter of resignation. The letter contained only one sentence: "I quit." It looked like something written by a child, not by an adult professional. Nevertheless, the company accepted it, and Elizabeth's resignation was officially classified as voluntary. Afterward, Elizabeth apparently resumed her activities as a YouTuber. She tried to increase her views by spreading lies that she had been unfairly dismissed from the company. However, her audience never grew, and she couldn't generate any income, leaving her in the same situation as being unemployed. The men she had bragged about dating also abandoned her as soon as they found out she wasn't the daughter of a company executive. Elizabeth had truly believed that she had kept these men interested through her own charm, but in reality, they had been attracted to her only because they thought her father was a company director, hoping to benefit financially. With no income from her videos and struggling to make ends meet, her eventually resorted to waiting outside the company, trying to catch Thomas. "Please, I've changed. I'll work hard. Just give me one more chance." But of course, Thomas refused to hear her out and had her turned away at the door. Even then, she didn't give up. When she was rejected, she went to Thomas's house, attempting to have a private discussion with him. "Please, if you hire me back, I'll devote myself to you wholeheartedly. I'll serve you with everything I have," Elizabeth said, trying to lean on Thomas, clearly attempting to seduce him with her youth. However, Thomas immediately stepped back, coldly replying, "Stop insulting people. Get out of here immediately, or I'll call the police." Rejected so harshly, Elizabeth turned to leave. Just then, by coincidence, I arrived at Thomas's house for work-related business, and I ran into her. I expected that Elizabeth held a deep grudge against me, and I braced myself for any harm she might try to inflict. But surprisingly, her response was entirely unexpected. "Please, hire me. If I stay unemployed like this, I won't be able to survive." It seemed that after everything, Nicholas had disowned her, and she had been kicked out of the house. Even Mary, who had once been so overprotective, had abandoned her daughter, leaving her with no one to rely on. Elizabeth bowed her head deeply in front of me. "I know it's selfish to ask for your help now, but I have no one else I can turn to. Helen, I apologize for all the terrible things I've done. Please, help me." She had tried applying to various companies in an attempt to find work again, but no one would hire her. Since she had voluntarily resigned from our company, the interviewers probably pressed her for details about why she had left. Digging into her past, Elizabeth struggled to answer those questions well, which caused her to fail every interview. "Are you really reflecting on your actions? You're not lying, are you?" I asked her, pressing her to be sure. "Yes, I truly regret everything. It was all my fault. I won't look down on others or slack off at work anymore. I promise." Elizabeth was desperate. She had nowhere else to turn but to me. "I can't bring you back to the company in the same role as before, but if you're truly determined to change and work hard, I'll introduce you to a job. Really? Elizabeth's face lit up with hope. Yes, but this time I won't tolerate any unexcused absences. If your work attitude is poor, you'll be dismissed immediately. Understand? I understand. I'll work as hard as I can. And so I introduced Elizabeth to a job. It was a position as a cleaner at our company, the very role she once mocked. I wanted her to truly understand the difficulty of the job. Our company is large, and cleaning each floor takes an entire day of hard labor. It's often dirty work, and tough for a young woman like her. The cleaning staff consisted mostly of veteran women, and Elizabeth was frequently scolded by them. It was no surprise, as she had hardly ever done any cleaning before. At first, I thought she would quit immediately, but to my surprise, Elizabeth stuck with it. Her coworkers spoke well of her, a stark contrast to the way she had been despised by her colleagues before. Now, whenever we pass in the hallways, she greets me with a deep and respectful bow. She had once been arrogant and cruel, looking down on others, but Nicholas's lies had given her a chance to change her character. You're still young. You can always start fresh. Keep up the good work, I said to Elizabeth with a smile. Thank you so much. Tears filled her eyes as she bowed deeply again, overcome with emotion. Seeing her made me realize once more that people can change. I intend to continue helping young people develop and grow for as long as I can.
Come on. I'm the one using the car. You? How about you walk home, huh? Starting the new year being bossed around, and now being told to walk home alone. The heartless man standing in front of me, embarrassingly, is my husband. And chuckling behind him? That's his mom and sister. You know the saying, like father, like son? Fits them perfectly. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 40 years old. I work part-time in an office. I live with my husband and daughter, Claire, who's in 8th grade. Raising a child goes by in a flash. It feels like just yesterday Claire was a little girl. She's going through a rebellious phase now, but she's a sweet girl who helps around the house when I'm not well. I met my husband, Daniel, at work. It was a typical office romance. Daniel's not exactly a whiz at his job, but he's calming to be around. Wrapped in his big arms, winters used to feel cozy. But over the years, he's become just plain stifling. The reason being, for heaven's sake, how long have you been doing housework for us? She hit me with the spatula she was holding. Hey, it makes me feel like I'm not joking around. I clenched my teeth and held back. Because the one attacking me is Daniel's mom, my mother-in-law. We've been at odds since we got married. In her traditional family, family gatherings happen frequently for holidays and ceremonies. Each time, mother-in-law would scold me. You're the wife of the eldest son, act like it. My problem isn't just my outdated mother-in-law. Hey, Eleanor. There's also my sister-in-law, who snacks on the fried chicken I prepared for everyone. Are you kidding me? I had a kilo of chicken. Is she a monster or what? I think it, but don't say it. My phone chirps with a notification. I glanced at it and couldn't stop laughing. What are you laughing at? Gross. Mom. Whenever I do something she doesn't like, she calls over my mother-in-law and I get scolded. That's how it's been at my in-laws' place. When I talk to friends, they say divorce is the only option. Of course, I've thought about it too. But Daniel, as unreliable as he is Claire's only father. I just have to endure a few family gatherings a year. Besides, it's not like I don't have any allies at these family events. My phone never stops buzzing during family nights. Hey, your phone keeps making noise. While stuffing his face, Daniel said this. By the way, he's on his third serving of rice. Oh? Maybe it's notifications from Claire's class moms on social media. Huh, mom friends, huh? That must be tough. That was a lie. There is a moms group, but this is something else. After finishing my chores, I sat down on the sofa to read the accumulating messages. Hey everyone, thanks for making it through another day. God, it was so cold today, wasn't it? Tell me about it. Our place must be the only one that's cold both in summer and winter. Speaking of which, Eleanor was such a pain to deal with today again, huh? Reading through the group chat, I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. This chat group includes me and Daniel's cousins' wives. While my issues with my mother-in-law might be on the higher end, it turns out the other wives have their share of grievances too. We instantly clicked and became close. Initially, we vented over the phone, but ever since we all got smartphones and joined social media, we've taken to griping here. By the way, while chatting with my sister-in-law, I received a notification. Eleanor, heads up. Your sister-in-law's zipper is down. I couldn't contain my laughter. And yes, sister-in-law's zipper was wide open. I might not have been able to endure this on my own, but with these allies, it's probably one reason I haven't divorced yet. When I'm getting passive-aggressive comments from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, Daniel just turns a blind eye. I once came home and tearfully said, "Why didn't you stand up for me?" I've been dealing with their snide comments all day. Daniel responded, "You're overreacting. It's not a big deal, really. Be stronger. What's for dinner?" He said it with such a dismissive look. The thought of divorce flashed through my mind, but our young daughter Claire adores Daniel. Daddy's belly is so soft and comfy. She'd say. I used to be like that too. I used to feel the same way about Daniel's big belly. I loved how he ate with such joy. But now, it just annoys me. I asked many times, "Why don't you lose weight?" He always says, "Claire likes my belly, and besides, obesity runs in my family." That's a lie. I've seen his relatives, only Daniel, his mom, and sister are obese. They're not just overweight, they're enormous, making rooms instantly feel smaller. Because of their massive size, the house is always freezing. In summer, the air conditioner is set to a chilly 64.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Feeling like we're in a freezer. In winter, as soon as sister-in-law complains, "It's too hot," the heater gets turned off, and we all freeze. We all wear long sleeves even in the summer. But still, it's cold. Despite the cold, all three of them sweat profusely. Finally, a cold-sensitive relative shouted, "Hey, what's the deal with this house? Why is it so cold? If you're going to complain, please leave." Mother-in-law responded, causing the room to empty out one by one. What era are they living in, talking about main and branch families? Of course, father-in-law would scold mother-in-law, but she would snap back. "You're hardly ever home. Don't act like you're important." Sister-in-law joins in, and they both berate father-in-law, who ends up just letting it slide. I wished father-in-law would take a firmer stand, but the thought of being shoved aside by those large bodies sends shivers down my spine. My sister-in-law is over 40, single, and unemployed. Once upon a time, my sister-in-law had a job. But she quit after finding out she was bullying a new employee who turned out to be the daughter of a major client. Now, she lives with her parents and doesn't work at all. She and her mom, my mother-in-law, live off her dad's money. When I married into the family, sister-in-law had already been unemployed for many years. She does want to get married and often goes to matchmaking events. But as far as I know, she's never had a boyfriend. She says, "I come from a good family, so my future husband needs to earn at least $80,000 a year." She used to say $100,000, so maybe she's lowering her standards. But let's be real, she needs a reality check. We should look more realistic. Sister-in-law claims she's from a good family because her dad, my father-in-law or father-in-law, owns a business. But the business was actually started by his dad, and it's been struggling under father-in-law's management. It seems that grandfather-in-law had a knack for business, but that talent didn't pass down to father-in-law. Ever since father-in-law took over, the company's performance has been on a steady decline. I know all this because I work at the same company. That's where I met Daniel, my husband, who also works there in a decent position. Many of Daniel's cousins work there too. My parents also own a small business. It's just them and a few relatives, but they're doing okay. They had me late in life and have always treated me like a treasure. Now they adore our daughter Claire, who prefers my parents over my in-laws. Mother-in-law doesn't seem to like that. "Is Claire spending New Year's at your parents' again?" Mother-in-law asks. "Yeah," I reply. Daniel sighs and says, "Don't you think that's weird? Normally, people spend New Year's with their paternal family." Then he says something unforgivable. "Well, your parents are old. They don't have much time left." I said such a terrible thing. It's true, my parents are nearing 80, much older than Daniel's. Daniel's parents, who married young, are quite a bit older than him. But they're still spry and sharp as tacks. When I once asked them, "Isn't it time to enjoy your golden years?" "We just want to buy things Claire loves. Seeing you and Claire happy is our joy." Every time I visit home, Mom always gives me some money. Daniel laughed and belittled my precious parents. "What did you just say? Don't you know the difference between what's okay to say and what's not?" When I angrily retorted, Daniel said, "Fine, fine. I'm the bad guy, as always. If you're going to be like that, we might as well divorce." Then he stormed out of the house. The nerve of him. He better be prepared. The following year, on New Year's Day, my parents came to pick up Claire. "Take care, see you later," I said to them. Claire seemed happy to see my parents and said, "I'll let you know how it goes," before leaving. It was refreshing to see Claire smile after a long time of her looking downcast. Even though my parents had come over, Daniel didn't even bother to greet them. What a rude guy. I felt utterly disrespected. After a while, Daniel came out of his room, and we headed to his parents' house. We haven't spoken since that incident. I don't understand why Daniel is mad, but I'm glad we're not talking. Lately, the only thing I've heard from him is, "Seconds, please." When I ignored him, he clicked his tongue and slammed the rice cooker shut. "Stop taking it out on objects," Claire chimed in. "Yeah, stop it." Only to be yelled at by Daniel. The atmosphere at home was terrible. As soon as we arrived at his parents' house, his mom, mother-in-law, said, "Oh, Claire is with the other family again this year? What kind of upbringing is that?" Daniel quickly threw me under the bus. "It's Eleanor's poor parenting. Sorry, Mom. You can tell a lot about a person by their upbringing." "Hurry up, we're busy with cleaning and preparing meals." This house felt as cold as ever. Upon entering the living room, I greeted the relatives gathered for the new year. Sister-in-law was there, and as expected, she ignored me. Despite the cold, seeing sister-in-law in a short-sleeve shirt and shorts gave me chills. When Daniel sat down, one of the daughters-in-law said, "Here you go. and carelessly served him tea. Everyone was on my side because Daniel had been discussing all his actions in a group chat. Father-in-law was out, so he wasn't there. Seriously. We're all gathered here because Charles said he has something to discuss. Mother-in-law was getting impatient. While shivering and eating, a 5-year-old cousin said, "It's cold in here." She turned on the heater. The next moment, sister-in-law yelled, "Don't touch things in other people's homes, you brat." She snatched the remote from the child and turned off the heater. Naturally, the child was shocked and started crying. "If you're going to cry, why don't you go home?" A grown adult, over 40, said this to a 5-year-old. The relatives were furious. "Apologize to my daughter, you worthless woman. We've been putting up with this for the sake of the family, but this is the last straw. We're never coming back. You and your family can go to hell." Sister-in-law, who hadn't expected such a backlash, started crying despite her age. Honestly, everyone was disgusted. "Hey! Why is everyone blaming my daughter? Don't you feel ashamed? If anyone has a problem, leave." This time, mother-in-law started yelling. "This family is insane. We're cutting ties with you." One by one, the relatives said this and left. The only ones remaining were Daniel, mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and me. The room felt even colder with fewer people. As I was shivering from the cold, mother-in-law said, "What are you standing around for? The cleaning and meals are done, so you should leave too." "Excuse me?" I said, "We're spending time as a family, so you should go." Annoyed, mother-in-law told me to leave, so I was happy to oblige. The moment I picked up my car keys, Daniel said, No, I'm using the car." "You can, walk home?" Daniel was unbelievable. He must be trying to annoy me because he doesn't like my recent behavior. They were all watching me, expecting me to cry, with smug smiles on their faces. "Why don't you guys walk for a change?" "Oh, but with those bodies, that might be impossible." "I won't be coming back here either." "Goodbye." "What?" I said it with a big smile. Daniel and the others were speechless, their faces turning red. They were always timid around people other than family. I should have done this sooner. I felt lighter, as if I'd grown wings, and even breathing felt easier. As I was about to leave, father-in-law returned with someone. "Oh, Eleanor, where are you going?" "It's unusually quiet here," father-in-law said, and the person with him greeted me. "Eleanor, long time no see." Saying that, he called out to me refreshingly. It was William, my former brother-in-law, who had recently become the company president. I am not married. He was single and had been working overseas. He looked handsome, much like father-in-law. It had been years since we last met. "William, it's been a while." Mother-in-law told everyone to leave, so they did. She also told me to walk home, so I'm about to do that. I said it matter-of-factly. Upon hearing this, both men looked at Daniel and the others with disgust. "Is this true?" father-in-law asked in a low voice. Mother-in-law tried to defend herself. "Well, everyone was blaming her." "Don't you find your daughter cute?" "Cute? This freeloader? She's just getting fatter. Are you all planning to become sumo wrestlers?" I'd never seen father-in-law so angry in the many years I'd been married into this family. I wished he'd scolded these hopeless people sooner. I even felt resentful toward him. Well, it doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm leaving now. And just so you know, I'm divorcing you. Do whatever you want. I glared at Daniel as I said this. He glared back, clearly unhappy. Eleanor, I'll drive you. Get in the car. Father-in-law offered, but I declined. I'm fine. My ride is already here. I opened the front door to find my parents and Claire waiting to pick me up. I had decided today to tell Daniel about the divorce, and I had already talked to Claire about it. When I told Claire we were getting a divorce, she hugged me, tears in her eyes, and said, "Really? Living with Dad has been so hard." He hugged me while shedding tears. Seeing Claire, Daniel desperately said, "Claire, you'll live with Dad, right? You love Dad." Claire started crying and said, "No way. After Dad takes a bath, there's hardly any hot water left. And he eats like a pig. Plus," Grandma said. After saying that, Claire burst into tears. Claire had told me various things when I informed her about the divorce. Grandma called me a failure. I couldn't believe it. That's not something a grandmother should say to her granddaughter. Mother-in-law looked guilty. And then this. Claire then showed me a photo of mother-in-law and sister-in-law shopping, their cart filled with meat and snacks. Some local overweight mom and kid are always blocking the aisles and being rude to the staff. So annoying. Those words were posted on social media by someone with no consideration. Claire's school caught wind of it. Thankfully, no one knew it was about her grandma and aunt, but the fear of being found out made every day stressful for her. Seeing Claire cry, Daniel finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation and fell sister-in-law. It was too late for realizations now. We're handing over the family business and moving to the countryside. We've always loved gardening, and we're looking forward to enjoying our retirement. Eleanor and Claire are coming with us, so it should be a happy time for all of us. When Dad shared this with the in-laws, "Moving?" Daniel's eyes widened in surprise. Of course, he was surprised. No one had told him anything. When we told our parents we were divorcing, Dad shared this plan with us. They had been thinking of moving back to the countryside where Mom grew up. They had already found a new home, and once they confirmed we were heading to the in-laws, they started moving our stuff. I'm truly sorry. My father-in-law apologized. Considering how Eleanor and Claire feel, we have no intention of forgiving you. Excuse us, Dad said, his eyes cold, and led us to the car. Later, I contacted my father-in-law to resign from my job. I had already discussed the divorce with a close colleague, so the transition was smooth. My father-in-law kept apologizing over the phone, but I cut him off, saying, "It's fine." I left the social media group with the other daughters-in-law as is. When I announced the finalized divorce, they all congratulated me and thanked me for my hard work over the years. Since the incident at the in-laws during New Year's, some had even improved their relationships with their mothers-in-law. I heard that little girl still occasionally cries, remembering what happened, but she's back to her old self and attending preschool. I'm truly relieved. As for my former in-laws, my father-in-law stepped down as the company president. The new president is my former brother-in-law, William. They gathered the family to announce this during New Year's. Daniel protested. "I'm the eldest son, you know." But Daniel had been taking liberties at work, leaving early and coming in late, all because he was the boss's son. It was exhausting to keep covering for him. His lackadaisical attitude towards work meant his department's performance was poor. Frustrated both at home and work, my former father-in-law consulted with my former brother-in-law. Turns out, he has some business acumen. The company's performance has been gradually improving. Wait a minute. I never agreed to work. Please use formal language at work, Zoe. I won't go easy on you just because we're family. My former mother-in-law and sister-in-law were told to earn their own living and started working at the company. Daniel was transferred, and all three were assigned to sales. Daniel, who had been so sure he'd be the next president, was demoted to a regular employee. For someone as prideful as him, this must be the ultimate humiliation. Honestly, it serves him right. It seems that he walks a lot every day and works desperately. According to a former relative who happened to see them, all three of them seem to have lost weight. Seems like it's been a good diet for them. Much better than staying cooped up at home. My former mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who used to be so close, are now constantly fighting, probably due to stress from work. I'll never forgive my former in-laws, but they've caused trouble for so many people. They should spend the rest of their lives making amends. As for us, we've moved to the countryside and are living peacefully. Claire, who was initially anxious about going to school, now says, "Mom, can I bring a friend home next time?" With a smile. I recovered to the point where I could say that with a smile. I was fortunate to find a full-time job quickly, so we're managing. My parents, who live with us, have rented a small plot of land and are busy growing various vegetables. The cucumbers we harvested this summer were delicious. I failed as a mother for not noticing Claire's pain. I intend to keep the lines of communication open with my family, holding the feeling of making amends to Claire in my heart. I plan to say what needs to be said and even have plenty of arguments. As a mother, I'm committed to cherishing my family from now on.